Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in.
So apparently, they said that if all had been normal in cartoon world, this would be the year that George Jetson would have been conceived.
Really?
Which is a little disturbing. Thank you for ruining my childhood, whoever came up with that. We do not have flying cars, but we do have AI. And it is all over the freaking news right now.
Yeah, I got to go back to the AI for the cars thing, though. We don't have flying cars that fold up into a suitcase either.
So yeah, hello. We're missing a lot here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So AI. Yeah. Rosie the robot in the Jetsons was an artificially intelligent robot too.
Yeah. So we do. We'll be getting Rosie, but we still don't have the flying cars apparently.
Yeah. Well, the cars are flying just down the road on their own. So it seems like we've talked about AI almost all the time now in relation to a lot of different things, and I felt like just in the last month, it seemed like it's just with Chat GDP, whatever, GPT, is that what it is?
I think it's GPT. Yeah,
I
Chat
wonder what that
GPT.
means. I don't even know what GPT stands for. Anyway, the chatbots are starting to write everything today. Literally just today, I saw an article on Comic Sans. BuzzFeed stock soars after they announced they'll use AI instead of writers to create content. And that didn't shock me necessarily because I knew that AI was already being used in some news outlets to do things like sports stories, financial stories, because those are formulaic. So you can plug in the numbers like, today on the stock market, this happened. But now it seems like they're going to be using it for a lot more different kinds of content. Not that BuzzFeed's content is all that complicated. Top 10 whatever of whatever
And
kind of stories.
and yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit in time. I mean, obviously AI has been around, so artificial intelligence has been around for a bit. And you're already kind of seeing it like with how they CGI the actors who have passed away or I know we talked about they were trying to develop like a complete AI actor, right? Their own
Mm-hmm.
entity basically. And right now, I mean, the whole okay, it's kind of weird. The creative community is up in arms. Like, a third of it's very well informed, and two-thirds of it is kept in the dark and don't know why the other third is up in arms. Where I've been seeing the most movement as far as, "No, we do not like this," is in the art community, because I think that's where it's I mean, you're right, over the last couple months, it's really, like, just exploded, and it really kind of started with the art stuff. Have you seen those where you can just plug in, you're like, "Oh, please create a picture of a dog in front of the White House wearing sunglasses," and in the style of Picasso, and then it comes up with something. Have you seen
Right.
that? So
Yeah.
that's the AI art is really where I mean, it's always been around, but that's where it's really begun the movement of like, no, you know, creators against AI. That's really where it's begun. And if you go on like Instagram or something a couple weeks ago, like everybody had these like AI with the circle and the slash around it, like, no. And they were trying to create awareness of what it's doing in the art community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen the filters where like it makes you into an anime character. Those kinds of art AIs. They're even on it was on the evening news. NBC News did an article on had Lester Holt, the news anchor, said he bought a piece of art, then found out it was AI generated, and actually went to talk to the quote unquote artist who sold it to him and said, "You didn't really design this. You didn't really create this." And he's like, "Well, I told the AI what to create, so it's my idea of what to create, but no, he didn't actually physically draw it." So then it became a question of, does that need to be disclosed? And if so, who actually is the creator? Who can profit from it? That kind of thing. So, there's a lot of these ethical, existential questions that are coming out now. And obviously, we actually have had this happen in our writers group where somebody brought a script just as kind of like I don't know, it was a joke, but like a little exercise to have us read a script that was created by an AI and ask who wrote, and the question was who wrote this, and people were like, this is ridiculous, and it wasn't a perfect script by any means. It wasn't completely fleshed out, but it had format, it had descriptions and language that you can understand. It created characters, it described the characters, it described the settings. The dialogue was stilted, but it had dialogue in most of the scenes. Some of the scenes didn't have dialogue, but it looked like the script that maybe, like, if you're just screwing around trying to flesh out an idea, that it might kind of start with, like the very early stages, but it was created by an AI. So we all were like, "Oh, this is not that good. This isn't going to replace us." If people can purchase art online and not realize that it's designed by an AI, who's to say a script for a show can't eventually be written by an AI and be produced, and people not believe that, not know or realize that it was created by an AI?
Well, what's funny regarding that example too. So we all knew something was off because the formatting on that was wonky. Like it was having fade outs in weird places and it would just like start up random dialogue. But what was interesting about that was it still it still gave stock characters that we recognize the archetypes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it still had an inciting incident because she only gave us 5 pages. It still had an inciting incident within the first 10 pages. So it knew, like, where things should be, even if it didn't do it correctly. But what struck me about that example was that writer also brought in a show Bible. The show Bible, with a little bit of tweaking, could have flown.
Yeah.
I was really actually very impressed with the show Bible. It had the log line, it had the breakdown of characters. It even had like 6 episodes
Oh,
and a
right.
little thing of
The
what could
story
happen in each
ideas.
episode,
Yeah.
and it worked. That one was actually grammatically correct and formatted properly, and I was like, "You could have actually probably turned that in." Maybe not like sell it to, NBC, but you could have turned it in for like a college screenwriting
Yeah.
class or something, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Right, and just a few years ago, there was another AI experiment where they fed up 300 something scripts into a program and had it spit out some short script, and it was like a completely unintelligible poetry slam type random nonsense kind of story. And if you just look at the progress from that point to this to today to what's going on now, it's a huge leap. It's like going from Mama Dada to see Dick run. It's progress, and if that's progress it can make in that period of time, what's the next step is the thing.
Well, I mean, it is artificial intelligence and it's supposed to evolve as
Hmm.
it learns things. So I'm not surprised that within just like a year or so, yeah, it has gone from, goo goo gaga to like, I can form a sentence because that's the whole point of it.
Hmm.
It's supposed to evolve like that.
What you said before, you said that like a third of the art world is up in arms and the other two-thirds are either not paying attention or misinformed. I mean, in our meeting, people seem to think that this wasn't that big a deal. Like they're like, "Well, our AI will never replicate our emotion or our experience." I'm like, I think people are short sighted in that. I mean, look at the artwork. The artwork is actually, it's, whether you like it or not, there's all kinds of different styles, but it's generating, you know, if I didn't know the underlying, art that it quote unquote scraped, I
Mhm.
wouldn't think otherwise that it wasn't original.
Okay, so to go back to that, that's a big reason why people are up in arms because it has to come from somewhere, right? Matter is neither created nor destroyed. And so, where is the AI getting the quote unquote inspiration for when I say I want a dog in front of the White House in the style of Picasso wearing sunglasses? It's getting it from other images that are already out there.
Yes, exactly. And whereas you or I might look at 20 or 30 pictures to get inspiration for something and then go create something new, it could actually be looking at thousands and thousands of pictures. So, how are you able to say that it's copying any one picture? Isn't that what we do as humans? We look at other things and get inspired and then go create something. Even in screenwriting, there are no new ideas, as they say. Everything is just, can you put your own original twist on it? Can you make it your own voice, your own unique situation? Can you apply it in a certain culture? it's still just, Avatar is still just Pocahontas, right?
Well, I guess here's the question. Okay, so when it is searching through all these images, is it taking, like, for example, is it taking the White House that was drawn by Jane Smith and using the shades drawn by Joe Schmo and putting them together? Or is it creating its own version of the White House and the shades that go on the dog? Do you see what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Because one would be plagiarism or copying outright,
Right.
and one is creating it.
Imagine the idea of making a collage out of magazine articles. You know how you used to do that? You used to
Mhm.
cut out like letters and words and pictures and put them together and make a collage.
Yeah.
And nobody ever said, "You copied all those magazines." No, it was your collage. You used pieces from copyrighted material, but you created something unique with all those various pieces. I think what AI is doing, and like I said, it's a volume kind of thing, is it's creating collages of art using microscopic pixel size, chunks of things. It's doing. I actually give it a lot of credit for. Again, I haven't compared, any of the artwork to original stuff to see how close it is, but I got to imagine it's pulling from such a wide range of imagery or information that it's what it's creating. At least, if you tell it to create something original, it to its mind, it's original. Like if you told me to write something about, you know, little yellow people who help out a mad scientist, I could write that. Yes, it would sound like Minions, but I could create something that sounds like Minions, but it's totally original. Nobody would ever say you copied Minions. Well, they might say that, but they wouldn't be able to say that it was a complete copy. It was like, okay, I did something different.
Yeah.
Maybe they're all lemurs instead of little yellow blobs. Whatever, that kind of thing. Of course, then that would be copying Madagascar, I think. But anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah,
Is you
yeah.
mix and match and you come up with something new, and that's all we do in writing. To be honest, I feel like I've been doing a lot of this, trying to brainstorm lately on new ideas, and like, oh well, that idea. Here's an idea. And like, oh, that's this other thing, and like, oh, here's another idea. Oh, that's this other movie. So I keep checking it off on my list. Like, okay, well, if I want to do this idea, how can I make it original? And we don't always have to go that far. We don't have to like really. I mean, we have to come up with something good, but we don't have to go that far to make it something original. I mean, when we pitch things, we even do. This is A
It
plus
sounds
B.
like so and
Yeah,
so, yeah, it sounds like this plus that.
we live in an analogy metaphor world, and it's how we describe things to other people. For us to say that our art is so original that it couldn't possibly, whether it's visual or performing, is so original and unique that it's never ever been done before is ridiculous. So to look at AI and go, well, it's just copying everybody, I think is hypocritical.
Mhm, I can see that. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, you also have to think though too, I mean, creative jobs are already as scarce as it is. You know what I mean? And now we're gonna give it to some AI, really? And it
Well,
also brings
yeah.
up the question of copyright.
Hmm.
Because, in fact, we can also put this in the show notes. Legal Eagle did a great episode on AI and copyright. One thing he said is that right now it's copyright is only in the human domain. But then you get into the question of like, okay, well, so if that AI bot writes the next Oscar winning script, someone's going to want to copyright it. So who owns it, the AI or the person who programmed the AI? And then you get
Mm.
into copyright is the life of the creator plus 70. So is it the bot's lifetime or is it the person who programmed it?
So
But you
theoretically infinite then, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. You see what I'm saying, And actually, it's interesting because apparently the copyrights for some pretty big properties, Mickey Mouse, the Steamboat Willie, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
then some Looney Tunes characters, a lot of like the classic cartoons, they're up in a couple years. Like that's pretty big. Well, what
Yeah.
if like some AI had created that? Is that like forever?
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
This comes to a huge question of AI sentience. You get into that whole singularity type thing, is because you talk about
mhm.
the life of the creator. Well, you have to first establish that AI is life before you can give it a copyright. This is like something that's gonna be really cool to see in the courts, isn't it?
Oh my word. Well, okay, but here's the question. Like, I don't okay, the question is not all right. let me see, how do I phrase this? Without getting into, like, you know, abortion rights or something, yeah.
Existential stuff here,
I
yeah.
think the question is not what defines life, but what defines humanity.
Mm,
Because
that's a good
because
question, yeah.
yeah, because the reason humans are different is we talk, we communicate, we create, right? I mean, not
Mhm.
that animals don't communicate with each other or, like, create, dams or create nests or something like that, but we create things that art is not it's beautiful,
It's not
and
necessarily
but it's
functional,
not
yeah.
functional, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so that's what makes us different than, like, our dogs and cats and horses and pigs and
Yeah.
stuff.
I will say there was that one story about the monkey who took a selfie and then on a camera that was, like, set up by some wildlife photographer, and then it went to court over whether the monkey had the right to the selfie or the person who set up the camera had the right to the
Oh,
selfie.
interesting. What did they decide, do you know?
I think they decided in the favor of the monkey. I'd have to look it up though.
I
Isn't that
mean, and then you think
crazy?
the monkey doesn't even care, right? I mean, I would think. Maybe
Yeah.
the monkey's ancestors, when they evolve, might care, but, yeah, they were just playing with the camera, right? But yeah,
Uh,
you have to
just see,
ask that
I
too.
found it. The court dismissed it
Oh,
actually.
they did? Okay, yeah.
PETA sued in favor on the behalf of the monkey, and it said the monkey cannot own a copyright under U.S. law. So it wasn't that the monkey didn't create it; it's just that the monkey could not. The monkey didn't have the right to have a copyright.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure the monkey didn't even care.
but
The
it went to
monkey's
court. I mean,
monkey's
it's
like, "I'm not paying those lawyer fees," you know?
yeah, yeah. PETA's doing this pro bono, aren't they?
But yeah, I mean, I think it comes into a question of what defines humanity because we can create.
Right. Well,
So
and the question is, will we keep creating? And you brought this up. We talked earlier about this. Is does AI being able to create these things like writing essays, creating artwork, creating scripts, whatever else we teach it to do, make us less creative? Do we stop and then do we stop being critical? Because we when the human creates something, it gets critiqued by all us other humans. Look at it and we decide the value of it.
mhm.
But if you build an AI and say this AI is making art, who judges the AI's art? Are we able to treat it with the same criticalness? And then if we start to base everything on that level of creativity, how does that level out humans in the creative space? I guess that's the question.
It kind of also makes me wonder if, I mean, I obviously right now it's not at that point, but if it does evolve to that point, wouldn't everything an AI create be perfect? Like, it would be the perfect script with the perfect balance of whatever, whatever, and it would have, like, it would hit all the right, here's the, um, inciting incident at the right moment, and here's the climax at the right moment, or, like, the art would be absolutely perfect, or do you know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't it be
Yeah,
just absolutely without flaw?
it's kind of the whole monkeys with typewriters kind of thing. I mean, that's just a an analog version of AI. It's like, if you had an infinite number of monkeys, typing on an infinite number of, you know, uh, typewriters, eventually somebody would write something coherent. It's kind of like that's assuming the monkeys don't learn anything too. So with AI, it's, an infinite number of CPU cycles. Eventually it's going to learn something and it's going to do something, that we all agree is, something of value, of merit, I guess. But do you give it merit because it learned to do that, or did because we humans do it because one, we have talent, and two, we practice and teach ourselves to do it better. It's a we put effort into it, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
But once an AI learns that, does it stop learning, or does it, like, let's say you did teach an AI to do artwork in, you know really good artwork in the form of Picasso, and then can that AI also go and then do Rembrandt? Is Does that AI have a style of its own? No. Now you've just told it what style to paint in.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
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 We don't do that as humans. We don't do that. We don't say, I'm going to learn all these different styles. You generate your own style. And that's part of that filtering process of learning and failing and learning and trying again. And, the critical application of, the artwork to it. And so if you're just teaching, like you said, going back to the beginning, if you teach an AI to look at other things and mimic it and combine the styles and stuff, is it actually creating its own style, or is it just, you know, crunching the numbers, so to speak?
I mean, and in that case, that's a very good point. Like, for example, as writers, we niche down, right? Like, I'm comedy, you're, good at like action thriller type stuff. But if you have an AI that can just source from everything, you know what I'm saying? It's like you have this thing that can write in any genre, can create any style of art, can write any kind of music.
Does it become a, instead of a jack of all trades, master of none, could it be a jack of all trades and a master of all?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And that also kind of makes me wonder, going back to your example of the guy who sold an AI piece of art, right now it's free. But if it does get that sophisticated, then what if it gets, behind a paywall, right?
Well, they could become NFTs or something like that. Yeah. Suddenly they have, value based on what people think they're worth. The thing with AI though is it's not like the AI is ever going to stop, I guess is the question. A lot of times paintings become valued because the painter's dead. So
Well, I mean, I guess my point is this. Okay, so like say chat GPT, right?
mhm,
And it's writing all these things. So then you're like, hey, like if right now chat GPT anybody can use. In fact, there's an issue right now on college campuses where students are using it to write their college essays and teachers are like, we don't know. Like, is this a bot or is this a human,
mhm,
right? And so like that's a big deal. It's free to use, but if you can start using it to sell things, right? You're creating art, you're creating scripts, you're creating whatever. Eventually, they're going to have to put it behind some sort of paywall, right? Because
mhm,
we can't all just go use it for free and then I mean, we can, but, like, I'm sure the makers of ChatGPT will be like, "Well, hey, I deserve a cut of that because now millions of people are selling scripts and selling
mhm.
books using it." You know what I'm saying? Like,
And artwork, right?
and
Exactly.
that's actually bringing me to another thought. I am an independent author, and I'm in a lot of author communities, and because it's so cheap or free, so many authors use it for their book covers, for their audiobook narration, and it's the only community I've seen. This is my very small little rant here. It's the only community I've seen where they happily indulge in it, whereas, like, I know, like, art actors, voiceover actors, we are all up in arms about it. But the writing community, for some reason, is like, "This is great," and I kind of wanna be like, "Guys, I know it's cheap and I know it's expensive to be an independent author. If you do it right, you've got book covers, you've got editing, you've got marketing. You can run thousands, tens of thousands quite easily. I get it. But don't think that you can play around in one part of the AI creative community and then it won't gun for you. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Like, don't be
right.
surprised if you're like, all of a sudden, my books are AI, but then maybe they might like that. I don't know, but it's really weird. It's the writing community is the only one I've seen where they're totally fine with it because it's so cheap, which gets me again to eventually it's gonna have to go behind some sort of a paywall, right?
Mhm. Yeah, no, and if there's money to be made, someone will try to make it, which brings me to one of the other AI things that we talked about was D&D and how
Oh, man.
Wizards of the Coast. You had to educate me on some of this. The Wizards of the Coast
Oh.
are looking to put
So
in a
let's
licensing fee. Go ahead.
let's go backwards in time on this one. Although things on the Wizards of the Coast thing are also constantly evolving, so as of this recording, who knows? Everything's fair game. But right before Christmas, leading up to the new year, the big issue with Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. So for 20 plus years, they have a thing called the Open Gaming License, which basically states, they have the books, the D&D books, which is like the rules, like how to play, and then they have like a basic world, right? And they've created several basic worlds for people to role play in, but you can also create your own. That's called homebrew. And for 20 plus years, this OGL was just like, "It's totally cool. Homebrew all you want, create what you want. Go ahead and make extra, modules and stuff like that, and it's fine, just credit us. That's all we ask. Just put this in the copyright," right? And for 20 years, I mean, you always make fun of me. You're like, "Oh my gosh, you're such a nerd." But yeah, D&D was very, like, underground, and it was, like, the purview of, like, us gaming geeks. And then, Critical Role and stuff like that happened, and now it's very popular. Stranger Things, and now it's in the consciousness of the mainstream.
Mhm.
So, it started with they wanted to get, I think it was 25% of royalties if you made a certain amount
I
on
I think it was over
D&D. Yeah, it was
$750,000.
it was a it was a high amount, but 25 is a big percentage. So that was the start of it, and then somebody leaked they were gonna update the OGL, and somebody leaked it, and there was a lot of things in it. You can go online, people have detailed it, like, ad nauseum on what's in the OGL, but one of the things that came out. So, okay, so in the updated OGL, they wanted to say, "Okay, you people who create, offshoot content, derivative works of Dungeons& and Dragons." So people who create, uh, homebrew content and then sell it, right? Because everyone's,
Mhm.
taking derivative works of D&D and D and then selling, like, homebrew content, or new books or new monster manuals or whatever. We want to take that in perpetuity, AKA forever, and use it for our own stuff. And we don't have to tell you, and we don't have to, give you any royalties off it.
Mhm.
But if you go under this new OGL, that is what you are agreeing to. People were not as up in arms in it as I think they should be. People were upset, but
Mhm.
then this is why I got up in arms, because then on the heels of that, they have a subscription service called D&D Beyond, and they came out saying, "And we're thinking of creating AI game masters, AI dungeon masters." Dungeon masters are the ones who lead the game in the
Mhm.
storytelling, right? It's
Right.
an D&D is an interactive storytelling game. So they're the ones that lead the game, they create the world, they create the conflicts that happen, and they lead the players into that. And I thought, if you create AI DMs, where are you getting that content?
More importantly, if you don't have a human dungeon master, how are you gonna determine who the biggest nerd in your group is?
Oh, come on, Tom.
Just
But,
kidding.
but here's a question too.
No, it's true.
Like, here's a question, actually interesting, piggybacking, I can't speak, off of that. So, I'm actually in a live stream right now called Punch and Roll, which is a role-playing tabletop live stream, and I've, game mastered now for, like, 2 years, and when I first started, and it was homebrew. When I first started, I did plot out where my characters were, not my characters, where my players were gonna go and what they were gonna encounter, and, what I wanted to have happen to them in each session, and then I realized the second time around, because people are people, and they never go where you want them to go, right?
Right.
And so I started to just improv it all. We had a fun time. We just improv the crap out of it. And for this live stream, I sort of prep, like, I have vague ideas of where, like, the story should go, but for the most part, I improv. And there have been times when I'm like, "Okay, you guys are getting in a fight. I didn't plan for this. I didn't create a map, but we're getting into a fight right now," because it made logical sense, because I have that skill of improv. But I don't think an AIDM could improv.
Oh, no, it sounds more like those text-based adventures where you only have a certain limited number of commands you could give it, and it can only respond to those. I mean, obviously, it'd be at a higher level, but it seems like it'd be more like, go right, go left. You wouldn't have the nuance of understanding the dynamics of the group or the adventure that they're on to like improvise like you're saying.
But wouldn't you need to sort of, I don't wanna say program it, but you kind of that's part of the fun of the game. I'm not saying every game is improv, but it's like at least 80 to
Yeah.
90% of it. It really is, because
That's what
you
I thought
have,
about it. Was there was
yeah.
the important thing was if Wizards of the Coast gets this license and they're able to take all these improvisational things, these thousands and thousands or however many, quests and adventures and put them into an AI and let the AI kind of learn that process. The AI could then generate endless, you know, quests, of ultimate, uh, diversity or whatever improbability that could go anywhere. It could pull on all those characters and adventures and monsters and and actions and create an unlimited number of endless possibilities. So if does that then supplant the need for people to create those? Like you're the dungeon master and you're creating the adventure and then you're guiding it and then you're improvising it. If the AI is doing it, then there's no human need to create that because the AI is creating it. You're just kind of responding to it at that point.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, because I guess from that certain standpoint, I don't think an AI could, like, if my players zig and I gotta zig with them, I don't know if a bot could do that. But I guess if you're it I guess from that standpoint, it's not me responding to the players, it's the players responding. They'll just get steamrolled into whatever the bot. Do you know what I'm saying? Because
Right.
it's the players responding to the bot and the
Yeah,
bot not necessarily
it's the
responding
difference
to the
between a
players.
linear video game where no matter what you do, once you defeat the boss, the next step is going to be whatever the game says it is. That's in a linear thing. You have to go through
Yeah.
different areas and fight different enemies, and then progress through the game. And it's not like you have a choice in that. You might have a choice when you do something, but you don't have a choice if you do something. Like if you want to go to the next part of the game, you have to do this
Mhm.
versus an MMO where you can wander around almost aimlessly and do different things. Like I do in Genshin Impact. You can go on quests, or you can go fight monsters, or you can go fight bosses. You can kind of do it in any order you want. But the thing with the D&D thing that I found interesting is if you take for example, a Genshin Impact kind of game, which has millions of players
Mhm.
and has them all contributing to a greater knowledge of what players do and want to do in the game, could you eventually build an engine or a AI to generate new adventures for them to go on that are unique and endless? Basically, is the question. Without
Oh, I
having to
see,
code
yeah.
it, without having to
Mhm.
have people sit around a table. Okay, this is the storyline, and this is what you have to do, and you have to collect these, and you have to fight these, and then you get this reward. That's kind of a real lame, simplistic structure. But if you can create enough, like especially the D&D is a great example because there's so much diversity in the content that's been created.
Yeah.
If you can harness all that content, can an AI then eventually learn to generate its own ideas and create adventures that you could go on? So
Which basically makes it like it learned
free.
improv.
Well, I was gonna say it makes the content creation becomes free then.
Mhm.
The company can sell it to you. The company gets to sell it to you, but the AI is creating it to them for free. They don't have to hire, a room full of people, of coders and designers and developers, because the
Mhm.
AI will be able to design it because we know it can design now. Eventually character design, why not? Story design, it's writing stories. And so why couldn't it do all of that? So now you'd be able to create games or game scenarios endlessly for free basically. And you
Mhm.
wouldn't need to employ game creators
Oh my gosh,
or
that's
writers or
this is making me
designers.
so sad.
So
I
we
mean,
kind of
but
come
the other
back, yeah.
yeah, the
to
other thing too is, like, I mean, you've basically so right now, the reason why the AI art and the AI writing, I mean, it's wonky, but the reason why it kind of sort of works is because everything's formulaic and it's pulling off of that, but now you're just basically saying, and that's really, I think, the heart of creation, that it can improv.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, we are because creation is improvisation, but
Mhm.
we follow that formula because we are also humans and we like routine and repetition and patterns, right?
Right.
And so, we know the Hollywood formula works. It's worked for so long, and so that's why we do it. But we also get really excited when someone, subverts the expectations and does something crazy.
Mhm.
So we like that unpredictability. But going back to what you were saying with the D&D AI DMs, that was a lot of acronyms right there. Um, all those printed books, the campaigns, and I'm not a fan of I've tried them in my campaigns, and I realized to me they feel limiting, so that's why I just homebrew it. But they give you a loose linear story for your players to follow with a little bit of wiggle room if they like, maybe they are exploring the temple, but if they wanna, like, you know, go to the bar real quick, they can, like, it gives
Mhm.
them that flexibility, but it does provide a 80% linear structure for them to follow, as opposed to when people and again, everybody also homebrew's different, like, I'm in a game right now
Yeah.
where the DM has very much plotted out everything, but then, you have people like me who really don't plot anything out at all and just react to what's happening in the moment, and I feel like if an AI could get to that point because it can create all that stuff the way you're saying, if an AI can improv, then it's just, like, game over.
Yeah.
Because that's really the heart of creativity right there.
Mhm. But like you just said, all of our creativity tends to follow some sort of formula. TV shows are a certain length, movies are a certain length. They have a certain number of acts. They're not always all the same. They're not always all the same number of pages, the same number of scenes, but they have structure. There are rules. Sometimes you break the rules. Sometimes, if you follow the rules too closely, what you get is crap. Sometimes you
Mhm.
got to break the rules.
Yeah.
So I think AI is somewhere along that continuum now. And it's just a matter of a time before uh, we're going to have AIs driving our cars, doing our physical labor, creating our art, creating our news. What
Oh
are we
my
going to
gosh.
do?
Right? Oh
I
my
mean,
word.
not just what are we going to, we're not, I mean, we, people will still want to create, but it's kind of like once all that stuff's being done for us, what do humans do? We're going
Yeah.
to be like the fat people floating around on chairs on
From
wall on
Wally.
Wally.
I know, I was
Yeah.
just thinking that. You know what's funny too? So I sent you another article and it was not AI related, but it was interesting to me. So the author of the article was talking about kids YouTube. And they were like, "Kids YouTube is really weird." And they were talking about, some of the programming out there, but everything's very, again, formulaic, pattern, automated. And it's like they find one formula that works. I we can put the article in the show notes, and, like, they just kinda keep, following that formula or whatever, and they just had some other things going on with kids YouTube. But it made me think, so we're of the generation that is programming and creating the AI. But children, they'll grow up, I mean, you already see it, right? Like, there was another article about, like, what's up with Gen Z, and this is not like a bash on Gen Z here, but, like, they were like, "Why does Gen Z put everything online?" They put, like, all their feelings and everything on TikTok, whereas we're a little more private even though we are social media, still in that
Hmm.
generation. But it made me think, if AI gets super sophisticated that it could write, say, an award-winning script, an award-winning novel, amazing art or whatever, we have grown up with the ability, because we knew a time without AI, we were trained in what makes good art, what makes good writing, what makes a good novel. And we can
Hmm.
look at an AI piece and look at it with critical eyes and see where it's good and see where it's bad and see where it needs to grow. But if a child uses those programs and doesn't develop that artistic sense and those muscles, what does because it kinda
Hmm.
makes me think of, like, what's the first thing that always gets cut in schools is the art programs,
Hmm.
right? They cut
Hmm.
theater, they cut music, they cut art, and this kind of sort of feels like it to me in a way,
Hmm.
and it's so crucial to, like, who we are as people, but, like, what's gonna happen to the next generation if they don't have that muscle and know how to use it?
Hmm. On that note,
AI, bum, bum,
AI,
bum.
it's going to be an interesting ride. We'll have to see where it goes.
I think it's gonna go quickly too. I think they're gonna have to start enacting laws and putting parameters around it,
Hmm.
you
I,
know?
I think I think you're right around not just what it creates, but what it's allowed to use to create that kind of thing. Like this whole licensing content for free from your users, that kind of stuff to
Mhm.
use in an AI. That's definitely going to be an issue. Or like just like with the screenwriting stuff, if you feed a bunch of scripts into an AI to get it to teach it to write screenplays, well, does it owe something to the people Who wrote all the screenplays you fed into it? That kind of thing.
Mhm.
Are they the teachers then of the AI?
Yeah.
Are we all the teachers of the AI? All right.
Interesting thought. What do you guys think about the AI debate? Let us know in the comments. You can find us online at WG Therapy or writersgrouptherapy.com, and we will talk to you guys in a few weeks.